Everyone, welcome back to FLX, exploring the intersection of quality, education, and equipment. I'm Adam Okada from Beyond Clean. I'd like to give a special thanks to our event sponsor, Agility, for supporting today's educational event. Their dedication to your education is what helped make today's event possible. I'd also like to thank CBSPD for collaborating with us for this one-of-a-kind event. Frank Daniels is a high-level disinfection program manager at VCU Health Systems. With over 10 years of experience as a high-level disinfection manager, Frank is dedicated to working closely with doctors and OR staff to improve patient care concerning HLD of medical devices. Frank's passion for promoting continuing education and training for healthcare staff allows his team to provide the highest degree of care to their patients. Teaming up with Frank is none other than Beyond Clean's founder and president, Hank Balch. Hank is a well-known industry writer, blogger, and social media connoisseur. He has written over 150 sterile processing articles, and his work is published across the globe. He's an industry disruptor on a mission to equip sterile processing professionals with the skills and knowledge to fight dirty every instrument, every time. Together, Frank and Hank are going to explore everything from high-level disinfection equipment strategy and planning to department culture necessary for high-performing HLD teams. You're going to hear firsthand experience about the implications of proper training, detailed budgets, and a relentless commitment to quality. You'll be glad you tuned into this session. So without further ado, let's welcome in Frank and Hank.
Hey, Adam, thank you for the welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Frank, are you ready to do this?
Absolutely.
All right. So, Adam gave a little bit of your background, but I think the way that you got in to high-level disinfection in particular, I think would be helpful to share for folks who are looking at this industry and these opportunities for growth. Maybe they're an endoscope technician right now and they're thinking, do I want to continue this route? What is the career growth opportunity for me? And so before we get into the meat of this interview, would you just kind of talk about your career progression and how you got to where you are today?
Sure thing. I have a background in engineering. I was a biomed equipment tech back in the days, and I was constantly repairing the AER at the time. It was one of the older ones that had a lot of glutaraldehyde and many nights trying to get it up to speed for the next morning. But overall, I proved myself to the VP of operations at the time, did that, then I moved on to, I was the solo person doing the artificial heart machines for our hospital. And then since I had a proven track record of making things work and getting things done, he said, hey, how about you go ahead and give this HLD room a try? And I was like, HLD, what's that about? He told me it was scopes and everything. I'm like, sure, I got scopes. They're real easy, right? And little did I know, this 10 years later it has grown to astronomical amounts. So.
Wow. Well, that equipment piece is a great place to start, honestly, because the topic of this session is building a high-performing HLD department. And obviously, there's a lot that goes into that. But if you don't have the right equipment, then it doesn't matter how beautiful your space is, how great your staff is. Everything fundamentally comes down to, do you have what you need and does it work? So let's start with that first kind of topic here. If you were to lay out, or even like if you were to walk into your department, maybe that's the best place to start, right? What are all the different types of equipment that we would see if we walked into your department today?
Well, I mean, it's evolved several times because, with technology, it's always advancing. But typical layout for myself is I believe in a 3-room process, because I've seen several high-level disinfection rooms where, hey, it's an open room, make it work. You have your decon, processing, clean, and that invisible wall is going to protect everything. So mine is more of a 3-room process. It starts off in decon, and I believe in going to equipment-wise, like you said, you can't do anything that your equipment's not capable of doing. So a long time ago, we started, there's a lot of water protrusion in scopes. So now we do a dry leak test on every scope that comes in. And of course, we follow the IFUs before it goes into the sink. You always got to have a reliable.
So let me stop you right there. So one of those pieces of equipment is a leak tester.
Yes.
So just want to give that shout out there. Okay, so we got a leak tester. You mentioned a sink, right?
A sink.
So before we go too much further, yeah, like describe your sink for us.
All right, so we had a custom sink because my height for my employees starts from 5 foot, and then I think my tallest employee is 6'4". So I had to figure out a way where my employee's not bending over, and then my other employee didn't have to jump on a bench to process anything in the sink itself. So now we have adjustable sinks because I want to look out for everyone's back and make sure everyone's down to that same level. But with the sink, awesome. you're going to need a reliable thermometer, and because you have to make sure the water's at the proper temperature for the basin, the water you filled in to according to the enzymatic or surfactant, and then it go from there. You have to have a good working basin because not everything can go into an AER, which is another piece of equipment. You have to have a basin where you can manually high-level disinfect products. So I'm sorry to get off track a little bit. So you have the thermometer, you have your AER, you have your good basin. You have to have a scope cabinet in order to help dry the process within the scopes itself. And then on top of all that, you have to have a way to track everything.
Right. Now, you mentioned a piece of equipment that I'm assuming most folks will know if they're tuning in to this session, but you said AER. Can you tell folks what you mean when you throw out those letters?
Oh, absolutely. That's an automatic endoscope reprocessor. This is your dishwasher to scopes, pretty much. That's how I describe it to people that aren't familiar with that process in general.
All right. Now, the thermometer that you mentioned, I'm assuming there's a couple of different kinds of those on the market. What's the one that you use? Kind of walk us through how that works.
Well, I use one that's calibrated. The one I get has the sheet that comes with it is calibrated every 2 years. That lets me know hey, this is a well-known, fully operational machine here. We have since switched to an automated dispenser that allows you to dispense the detergent as well as show the thermometer, the reading of temperature itself.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, I think we're going to have a couple of other pieces of equipment that probably come up in conversation a little bit later, but I want to talk about planning, right? Because you actually started your answer with this 3-room concept, and I want to dig into that a little bit more because I'm sure folks out there, when you said like there's a lot of rooms that are just all in one, I think that word room is probably generous. There's probably a lot of closets that are all in one, and that space constraint is very, very tight. So if you're looking at a blank slate and you're planning this equipment, like in addition to that 3-room concept, you can flesh that out a little bit more, but what other strategies are you looking when you were building out a high-performing department like yours?
Well, the first thing is, what did I need? Because you have to build about what exactly you need. I mean, there's a lot of technology out here that will take you to the next level or whatnot, but what exactly do I need? All right, I need an AER. I need a reliable AER at that. So then I built around that. I need a sink that can accommodate my tallest and my shortest employees. I needed a reliable leak tester. So that's why air pressure and everything in the rooms, the 3-room system works a little better because I can keep a negative pressure in one room and I keep the positive pressure in the other. I really went and thought about it as a central sterile room, but of course without the prep and processing portion of it. Because, hey, why build something that isn't broken, and a proper central sterile room has them all broken up into individual rooms.
Now, a couple seasons ago, we did an interview with a technical specialist from Bellamed named Steve Sutton, and we talked about this one-way flow of instrumentation. And, that interview wasn't particularly talking about flexible scopes or high-level disinfection, but the concept is the same. It's about planning and laying out in a way that your instrumentation can go from dirty to clean to disinfected, or in the case of instrumentation, often sterilized, right? in laying out your department, how have you worked in that one-way flow of instrumentation into the normal day-to-day steps that your technicians take to go through that process? Like we've talked about the sync, we've talked about the AER, but what's that flow of instrumentation look like in terms of planning?
When planning, you don't want to go backwards in it, and I say that as, all right, I don't want my sink in the middle room. It doesn't logically make sense. When a reusable device comes in and it's contaminated, biofilm, bioburden on it, I don't want to have to start the AER and then, I got to bring it back to the sink and do all this just to reverse flow again. So when you're laying it out, of course, all the recommendations say you must do a leak test. So right when you walk in the room, that's where the leak testers are.
Great point. And that sounds like so simple, but I cannot tell you how many departments we walk into on the consulting side of things. And yeah, the leak tester is way over on the other side of the workflow. And it makes you go out of order. It makes you break that chain of processing. And then all kind of dangers can happen. You can be in the middle of leak testing, have to leave for something, someone else comes in and just sees a scope at the end of the table. It looks like it's been through the whole process, but actually it's only been leak tested and then needs to go back in the process to go over again. So yeah, just that point is so critical for folks to understand. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Yeah, like I said, my background engineering, so my brain works a little different than some people. So mine's always tasks and processes. So as soon as you walk in, bam, leak test right there. All right. So, and like I said, it's a dry leak test. So after it's performed its duty, see if it's passed or not. Then, of course, we notate it. Then it goes to the sink. So from leak tester straight to the sink, right side by side. You do your washing, flushing, brushing, and all that good stuff. And then before we leave the sink, I have 10 times magnification on it. I can't tell you how much this has saved us because, everyone says they got good eyes or I know this and I know that. But once you look under that magnification, that lit magnification at it, you'll see a film on the distal tip. You'll see a crack on the control handle that you wouldn't normally see. So, and that's also a scan point that I have. So once it leaves the sink and has this lit magnification, then it goes to the AER. I want it progressing away through the room so I don't have to come back. And then after it's AER, it does its magical thing, it deems the scope clean, high-level disinfectant. Then we have it going directly to our clean room where it's hung up inside of a cabinet and waiting to be used again.
You mentioned a very important, another word there on your magnification inspection step, and it's the word lit. And so that part, even in the AAMI ST79 guidelines, there are recommendations for the amount of lighting that's required in different areas of the department, depending on the job that you're doing, and actually even depending on the age of employees. The older we get, the more light that we need to see what we need to see. And so the fact that you're using like lit magnification is huge, but I would imagine as well that just lighting in general in that decontamination area is another critical aspect of good planning, good department planning, correct?
Absolutely. We can't ask someone to clean something if they can't see it correctly,
So we had a question earlier about flushing, and you mentioned that as one of the steps here. Do you use automated flushing in your department? If so, what does that look like for your team?
Absolutely. Anything that goes in the sink goes through automatic flushing and brushing. That way it kind of takes the human error out of it. Before we all process things differently. Some people are a little faster, but my goal was to try to eliminate human error and eliminate cross-contamination. So I have a device that does the same exact thing every time. Hey, I know it's getting flushed for, a minute and a half to 2 minutes every time. I know it's at times as you're brushing. I'm going to get, 3 to 6 minutes brushing every time. It takes the guessing game out of it for us.
Right. And now we got another question, and we're getting a lot of questions here. So some of these I have to wait to the end, but I want to pick up some of them because they're it's a good time in this flow of questioning. We had a question about drying. What is your drying process? What does that look like coming out of the AER?
So AER, as soon as it comes out of that, ours is in a basket. One less time to touch it, try to prevent cross-contamination again. We take it to our clean room. We'll knock down the water, the exterior water, with a instrument air, and then we put it into our drying cabinet. Drying cabinet starts ticking down, so in in an hour, it's fully dried inside. Up to 3.5 hours to 4, then it's fully dried outside. So every scope has its own little spot in our cabinets. Then on the top of it, you can see, hey, this scope has been drying for 20 minutes. Or let me get this one because this scope has been drying for 2 hours. Right. Usually we don't get that long on them because we have a fast-turning suite here.
Yeah, I think that's the story of everyone's life, I think, with these devices. So I just want to clarify, though, before we move on from that point, you're talking about forced air, right? You're connecting these scopes in that cabinet to something that's circulating air through those channels, right?
Absolutely. It's not just a drying cabinet. It also is a storage cabinet because after it's hit its magic mark, it's right at an hour, it drops down the air pressure and then it continuously pushes air through the endoscopes. And as well as I do, the endoscopes are getting longer these days, so we want that constant air to make sure there's no growth potential within the scope itself.
We got another question on that comment about visual inspection. I think you might have answered it, but this is another one where we'll dig in a little bit more just on your process, because I think folks are very curious about the process because you're throwing out a lot of things that the majority of us just don't have. Like, we're aware that there's inspection devices out there, that we're even aware of these drying cabinets, like all those kind of things. But typically we get, one of those kind of things, maybe two of them, but everything else we have to settle for like 10-year-old technology, right? But the process of visual inspection with that magnification, someone asked, do you document that? And then I'll ask, if so, how do you document it in your process?
All right. Absolutely, we document it because at the end of the day, you're only as good as your paperwork shows. I made it a scan point, so it's a change saying, hey, they scan their badge, they scan that scan point saying, I've completed the lit magnification. That way, we're fortunate enough to have electrical system, so it goes straight back to our computers, and I can look at it at any time to verify that everything has been inspected. And not just for scopes. I mean, this goes for any reusable medical device that goes in the sink. It has to do that lit magnification performance.
Right. And I know we've got a great session later on in this conference from Sunil Mandava that's going to be talking all about tracking and tracing endoscopes. And so that topic's going to have a lot of focus on that one as well. Let me ask you one more question, and then we'll close out this section on equipment. Well, I guess two more questions. One more audience question. So we were talking about equipment planning and department layout. What is your opinion on pass-through equipment, in particular with these AERs or even the drying cabinets, right, depending on where they are in your process? But do you have any pass-through equipment? If so, what was your decision around that?
We actually have a building will be finished December 6th. And of this year, of course, with COVID, it pushes everything back a little bit. Well, right. Pass-through, I got to say, it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread because it makes you put it in, hey, it's dirty on this side, and I can only put dirty in on this side, and I have to go to the clean side to put it in. Now, it takes space, and space is a commodity in all facilities that you touched on earlier. But if you have the space, it's going to be the most ideal thing for a pass-through AER. And for a pass-through endo-dry system or a pass-through drying cabinet system, look at it as a vending machine. I go to the vending machine, hey, I need this one. or I need this. It eliminates someone having to run and get it for you. You just go up to it, 2 scans, I got my scope, and I'm going to go see this patient with it. So I think it's the way of the future, cuts down on yet another touch for cross-contamination.
Right. Yeah, great point, and I agree with you on that. If you got the space, it's a good decision to do. Yeah, totally. All right, to wrap up this equipment piece, equipment downtime, right? Knowing your background as a clinical engineer, and your whole job is keeping this equipment up and operational, I'm assuming that you have some opinions on this. So, what do you do to manage downtime? Are you tracking it? How do you interface with your own clinical engineering team or with manufacturers? Just kind of walk us through that process.
All right. So yet again, I have the luxury of having a resource of having my own equipment personnel. They make sure that everything.
Come on now. That's not fair. That is not fair.
Oh, you know.
How did you do that? I really want to know, because that sounds like a terrific resource, and I don't even know what it is besides that it's dedicated to you, right? So how did that come up?
Well, it's all in data. We were having some downtimes because I can only process what the machines are allowing me to do. If worst case scenario, and then I have 2 or 3 machines down and I only have 4, how can I keep up with demand? So once it hits my room, I give a 2-hour turnaround. And in order of giving that turnaround, I'm putting my name on it. Hey, I'm going to give your device back to you within 2 hours. So I have it all situated where it's got to be the most efficient. Well, I ran into a couple, bumps and bruises with a piece of equipment going down, or, hey, this one wasn't calibrated early in the morning, or this one should have been preventive maintenance, and we're just getting it on the last day, so it has to bring it down. So after the data, I show upper leadership how much business we're losing. And I say business, I consider it as a business within HLD. I'm supplying the customer with a high-level disinfection device that they're going to use. So I went back to leadership. I was like, hey, I really need an equipment tech because I'm maintaining all the scopes going in and out. I need all the equipment performing at its highest capacity in order to keep up with your demand. Or you have to order more scopes. Scopes are not cheap, depending on one. I mean, you can you can buy a house with a couple scopes, All right. So after the data gave it to upper leadership, they saw where the downtime we were hurting. They went ahead and improved. They have a couple of equipment techs, and they are a lifesaver. And they are hard-working individuals because I rely on them to make sure this machinery is up and running at its top shape.
So what is their responsibility? I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I am very curious. Like, what is their scope of responsibility? Like, are they only dedicated to your department? Do they have responsibilities outside of HLD? Kind of walk us through that quickly.
They are mine and to use, and they help the department to flow properly. I mean, their responsibilities, just to put it out there, I have 473 flexible scopes. I have about 992 different devices that come into my room. And that's not counting the ophthalmology lenses, everything, or we'll be counting for days, So they're responsible for if a scope or reusable device breaks, it goes out for repair. They track that. They get it ready to go out. They also make sure all the equipment, as we talked about, the leak tester, the sinks themselves, the dosing machinery, the flush and brush, the AERs, the filter changes on the AERs. They're responsible for doing that. It's a full-time job for them, and they're hustling all day long. I was fortunate enough to get a really good equipment techs. I mean, and they understand, hey, if this is down, we can't do our process.
Right. Well, I really want to applaud you, and I want to challenge the folks who are listening today. You mentioned the importance of data in making that argument, right, to get this support. But the fact that you just threw out those numbers of how many devices go through your department, what you're responsible for, I know as a sterile processing manager, if you were to put me on the spot, how many devices, how many trays in inventory today are coming through my department. I don't know if I could have thrown out that number, but the fact that you're aware of that and can speak to that on the spot, that's so valuable. So if you're listening today and you're running one of these departments, like, just make that as a takeaway from this session. Go back and figure out how many total pieces and devices of equipment are coming through your department. What are you responsible for? Plus all those little extras, right, that are hard to count. But at the very least, like, you can put that hard number on there and then start working backwards, which is what it sounds like you did. Like, we got these devices, we got these equipment, we have these volume, and if you want to keep everything up and going, I need this kind of support. Which brings us to the next topic, which is staffing. So we've been talking about the engineering support staffing here, which is critically important to all the points that you made. But let's talk about HLD technicians in particular. How would you define a high-performing HLD tech?
Great question. I've been asked this before. And, the easy answer is to say, oh, they're confident in doing all the scopes and they're confident in doing all the equipment. Yes, they are high performance if they know how to do every scope. I have 152 different models of reusable devices that come through my room. So that's a workload right there. So confident in all the machinery. I have a lot of technology, and it's constantly changing depending on the year, it seems like. But I also challenge the high performers to think outside the box. I want them to say, why can't we do it this way? What's making us from doing it a different way? And I love those questions, because I think in today's society, a lot of people is like, we do this because this is the way we were shown. I want them to say, we do this because, hey, X, Y, and Z. They have to be able to articulate in what they're doing in order to show other people how they're doing it.
In your experience as a hiring manager for those folks, are these high performers, are they born that way? Are they mentored and trained into that kind of person that you're describing? Like, is it a combination of both? What's been your experience with that?
It's a combination of both, because, as a hiring manager, anybody can interview well. They can do it well once, and then once they get in, you're like, oh, this person isn't how they perceive they were, But I've been blessed. I have the best team imaginable. And I go out there and I was like, all right, I like to make people think. That is my process. If they can think on their feet, then we can train them how to be. So to answer your question, it's going to be a little of both. You get someone best of both worlds, that's optimal there.
Now, based on what we were talking about a second ago, I know at least a part of your answer to this next question, but when you're taking a look at staffing a department of any size, like as you described, you've got a large department with a lot of volume coming through, a lot of equipment to run, so you need a lot of people. But how have you kind of conceptualized and justified staffing a department like yours, based on the volume and based on productivity metrics or benchmarks? Like, what tools, what concepts? Just kind of start anywhere you want, but talk about how we in the industry, looking at our own departments, could make some of the wise decisions that it sounds like you've made in terms of staffing.
We touched on a little bit earlier. It's data. Data makes our world go round. Of course, hey, if we're staffing for a clinic, it's going to be much different than staffing for the hospital, because, clinic are usually, 9 to 5:30, they're done, they're having a great day. The OR or ED, they're coming, 11, 12 at night. So we had to find out exactly what our hours are going to be. So I staff my rooms from 6:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. And also we have an on-call system. So that's a given. I need one person that's going to open, I need one person that's going to close. Then the data tells me, okay, at 9 a.m., I'm getting hit with 30 devices. So I need to have personnel that's going to be able to perform high-level disinfection, cleaning, and all the processes. Well, the data tells me, okay, it takes this long for a delete test. It takes this long to clean the sink, for dosing, for the AER, and everything like that. So go back. It's just your data that you have to collect. You're only as good as the data you're giving out. And with data, upper leadership, they have to listen to you. I've been fortunate enough where I have a very responsive upper leadership, and they see the data, and then they go with me on it.
So I really want to try to break this down for someone like myself, that even though I love data, it's hard to sort of think about data without seeing the data in front of me. But if you can kind of talk through, let's just say, you know your volume, you know when those scopes are coming, to your point, you know your commitment to that 2-hour turnaround. Well, maybe let's start there. Why 2 hours? Like, how did you come up with that 2-hour commitment to your customers for flipping these scopes?
Well, 2 hours because I put together, all right, so you know leak testing, as soon as it comes in, it's 2 to 3 minutes. That's how long it takes for a dry leak test. And after that, sync time. Sync time's anywhere from 14 to 19 minutes. And I have that scheduled in. Lit magnification, throw that on top of it, and just to reconfirm everything's doing. So I estimate, 18 and a half minutes. Then it goes to the AER for, 48, 49 minutes. And then I need a drying time. So I encompass all of that. Now, can I get the scope out faster than that? Absolutely. But what if I already have all the AERs running? Or what if I have, 20 scopes waiting? So worst case scenario, and I should get it out within 2 hours. So far, I've been tracking this since 2014. I've missed it 13 times. And
Wow.
I could not do it because we had a water main break right by our hospital, and it was giving kind of like muddish out. So we had to move everything to a different room to process.
Wow. I mean, I'm impressed that you have tracked how many times you have hit that 2-hour goal. Again, you're making me feel bad as my own manager, because like we have commitments, right, that we can't get it back to you any sooner than X amount of time. But that step that you're taking, that, yeah, you make that commitment, but then you also track that data to show how often, to show how often you're not hitting that, even goes back to the question about staffing, is if you consistently start not hitting that turnaround, is it a staffing issue that you don't have enough people? Is it an equipment issue that the downtime is causing a problem? Like, then you finally have a reason to go back and look at the process, because the data is like flashing a red light at you, right? But if you're not tracking that and you're not reporting that, and it's a lot harder to visualize that problem or that breakdown in the process. So, yeah, I really commend you on that. And again, I hope folks out there are challenged, but also encouraged that there's more that you can look at to help you make those decisions. So that's a great point.
But if you look at it.
So go ahead.
But if you look at it, the way I look at it is, if I didn't track it, how can I see where our flaws are? It's hard to tell the department, hey, we're going to take all your scopes and process them, because they're used to kind of doing it themselves or sending it to a different department. You have to get that buy-in from everyone. If you don't keep that buy-in, then you might as well hang it up. You're not going to succeed in it.
I mean, that's really a customer service part of it as well. Like, I know we're talking about justification and the data, but to your point, if you're taking over like a new service or a new department, yeah, you want those customers to be happy, and you want to set reasonable expectations for what your service level is going to look like. And yeah, if you're not measuring that, then how can you tell yourself that you're doing a good job? And if your customer, has different perspectives, at least you can bring the data to them and say, listen, we track this internally. We know what the turnaround is, and we know how often we're missing the mark.
Absolutely, because you know as much we're easy to get blamed for downtime of not having scopes out. So, but if you have data, I mean, numbers don't lie.
It's good for self-defense reasons too, right? So, we talked a little bit about the workflow and process, and you gave a couple of answers to this, but I do want to ask you a question on the why. And as we're talking about a high-performing HLD department, it's important that folks know why you've decided in building this department that you've built to do certain things and not to do other things. And a great example of that is the pass-through conversation that we talked about before. As you mentioned, right now that's not in your department, if I understand correctly, but that is a decision that you've made in this future build out for all the reasons that you laid out. And I want to make it, I want to kind of encourage, again, I keep saying that word, but I don't want people to be disappointed in this session if you're not at the same level that Frank's department is, right? Because we all start in the closet, in the basement in some sense. All of us are having to build up. Now, every now and then you get lucky and you stumble into a brand new department as a technician or manager and it's the Taj Mahal and everything's great, but that's the exception to the rule. So wherever you're starting and whatever decisions you're making to improve the process, you want to know why. And the answer can't just be, oh, because it's a new piece of equipment or because it's a new workflow that I heard about somewhere. You really need a deeper why than that. So is there another example maybe that's that you have, similar to the pass-through for a change in your department workflow that you've made that has a good why behind it that we can flesh out?
Absolutely. I mean, I can talk on this subject forever, but with new technology it was always a guessing game. Did we get that scope pristine clean? And that's what kept me up at night. I was like, is it 100% clean? Because I can eliminate anything I can possibly, but at the end of the day, it's only as clean as the person doing it. So now we implemented a borescope. I've looked around. I bought my first borescope about 4.5, 5 years ago. It was a fiber one. So it did its job then. And I thought, yeah, I'm on top of the world, And then now these phenomenal borescopes come out. They're video. I can take pictures. I can do videos. This year alone, I've rejected 25 scopes come into my facility. And that's being repaired, or that's OEM, like brand new. And this is OEM and third party, because, first thing people say, well, it has to be third party. I hear that all the time. But these are brand new scopes and scopes that went out for repair. Some of the pictures I've seen that came back repaired, ready to use, yes, not so much. So, and I look at it as, hey, I've challenged my team. We have eliminated those 24 scopes. Are we eliminating everything? We're doing the best I can to eliminate it. But we've seen like repairs where the glue constricted the entire lumen. You couldn't puncture it through it. And, glue, we're just not going to make glue come out. Right. It's going to eventually come out once it goes into a patient. And then, therefore, I was like, we have another outbreak, So it's expensive. Borescopes, they're not cheap. But if you can get your hands on one, that's just another level of protection you're giving to your patients at the end of the day.
Right. Well, and it's another piece of data, to your point.
Absolutely.
Because you can measure, you can track, you can hold yourself accountable, and you can hold your partners accountable, to your point, whether they're manufacturers, whether they're other departments, using scopes, like coming back with damage that wasn't there the last time that we sent it out in your department. Like all those things come back in there. We did have a question. I know this is kind of one section back, but we had a question from the audience about that 2-hour tracking time. And specifically, they want to know how specifically do you track that? What's the mechanism that you use?
All right. So the scopes are brought into my department. They deliver the scopes to me, and then they come and pick up the scopes back to them. And that's a full-time job there, too, because in 2019, we did about 46,000 devices that came through my room. We would have knocked over 50, but of course, COVID stopped the world, and we're getting back to it now. But as soon as it comes in, it's scanned, and then it's scanned right to leak testing. So that's when that 2 hours starts. As soon as it comes in the room, boom, scan, the clock's ticking. When we finish with it, it's ready to go back. That's where the clock stops. We call them and say, hey, it's ready to pick up your scopes, or we tell them, hey, they know by now if they want the scope back right away, come back within 2 hours. Could it be done in an hour and 45 minutes?
That's all measured through scanning, though, is what you're saying. It's the scan in, and it's the scan when it's ready.
Absolutely. I mean, that helps with the data. That tells me about my 13 that I missed in the last 7 years. Hey, that's why.
Right. Yeah. Which that's an unbelievably good stat. I mean, another round of applause on that. We have a question about the borescope, and of course, we can do a whole series just on borescopes. But The question from the audience is, where in your process are you currently utilizing borescope inspection? Is it just on the clean side, just on the dirty side? You doing both? You doing it somewhere else too? Can you walk us through that?
All right, so right now it's whenever a device goes in to be repaired and when it comes back from being repaired, as well as if anyone's in the sink, anyone that's currently processing an HLD room has to be fully signed off on competency, and they have experience. So if they feel something that just isn't right, if we're a high volume department, so if something is just restricted, just doesn't feel right, then they ask to read a borescope. Then that's when it's borescope right after that.
Okay. We've had a couple questions come through, and I guess this is as good a place as any to throw this in here. Are you doing any ATP testing? And if so, what does that process and that documentation look like for your team?
Absolutely. It's how ironic that you bring this up, because last month we do ATP testing just as a check on is the scope clean enough? So we do it right after the sink. And one of my employees says, oh, I can be better than the rest. So, and now it's a competition. We do ATP testing through a luminometer, anything greater than 200. So that's measured in RLUs, relative light units. Anything over 200 is failing, and it goes right back to the sink. But the really enjoyment of seeing this is, all right, I'm combining both outer surface and lumens, and I have people hitting like 15. 16, and then the other person I got to beat this. I'm getting below it. I have an ERCP. ERCP has 3 checks. It has a channel, has exterior distal tip, and it has internal lumens. I have people throwing up 30s and 40s, and that's combined all the numbers together. So it goes back to training. The technician has to know what's expected of them. So at the end of the month, I'm not going to reveal the prize, because I know there might be 1 or 2 that's listening to this, but it's going to be worthy. And we're going to do it every month, first to the last. And the numbers are hit, and it's a healthy competition, and it seems like they're enjoying it.
Awesome. No, that sounds great. And I love those creative ways to incentivize quality. I think there's so much pressure on incentivizing speed and productivity, but there's not enough emphasis on, are we doing this to the level that's actually safe? So yeah, that's great. Kudos on that. Let's run through a couple of other topics here, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A out there. Some additional Q&A in the audience. We've been taking questions all along, I guess, but the question about training, you just brought that up, right? And I really want to give you time to throw out your vision for onboarding new technicians in your department. Now, whether or not they are experienced outside somewhere else, or whether they're just coming in, fresh off the street, what does that process look like for you, and how maybe is your vision different from what may be in the industry today?
All right. Yes. Well, about 90% of the people that interview with me can't tell you what HLD stands for. I'm getting people that are very green, fresh off the streets that don't know what HLD is. So, and then I was like, all right, this could be an issue because they're not experienced as if I get someone from SPD. SPD should know what high-level disinfection is. They should have a good foundation and everything. So about 4 or 5 years ago, went ahead and did a new hire orientation. So 1 sheeter. It starts off with day 1. You're sitting probably about 20 feet from me, and you're on a computer. I bought a series of quizzes and tests, and it's an online presentation, and you have to go through that. It takes about a week, sometimes 2 weeks. You go at your own pace. Any questions, I'm there to help answer, as well as my coordinator. So they go through that. All right, then they got to read standards. How can I expect people to go by standards they don't know what they go by or what they mean? So, and I'm sure SC91, it's a long standards for high-level disinfection. And then my department policy there And then once they go into the room, they're just there to shadow for the first 3 or 4 days, because this person might be overwhelmed. I don't want to throw them to the wolves and say, all right, well, I need you to process this scope for me. They're going to look at me like I've lost my mind. So they have to be signed off individually on each medical device that we do. And then of course, we do that every year, as well as they have to show it to my supervisor, coordinator, and myself. That lets us know, hey, this person is ready to do this task.
Well, that's a topic I think that there's going to be a lot of questions on. And to let the cat out of the bag on this, we're planning on having you also on a Beyond Clean podcast interview here soon. And that may be the topic, honestly, that we dig into, is that training piece and that onboarding piece. And it goes to another conversation in another episode that's coming out this season, talking about the difficulty of finding staff today. And that's true all across sterile processing, definitely true on the high-level disinfection side. But your point about 90% of the folks applying have no idea what HLD even is, and then taking that person from 0 to 60 in a structured and standardized fashion, I think that's a skill set that a lot of folks out there on the manager side of things and leadership, they need to know how to do that, because that's going to be more of the status quo in the coming days. To close out this interview portion before we jump over to the live Q&A, I do want to ask you one more question about budgets, because anyone listening to this, is kind of taking notes on, oh, they do that, oh, they got that, but it's going to come down to budgets. And you mentioned a couple of points now, the importance of data when it comes to your budgets. Is there anything else that folks need to be aware of to make the best case for justifying their budgets, whether that's a renovation, a new build, new scopes, whatever it is, outside of just the data point? What else do you do that you found effective in getting what you need for your department?
Well, just like anything else, all professions are growing. So now if a physician wants to take on a new specialty, or they bring in a new specialty here, and okay, well, that's adding 30, 40 scopes every week, and you got to take an account for that as well. So budgeting your consumables, that's data. That's a given every year. Hey, this is a good estimate. This is what we used last year. We're going to grow, by like 4 or 5%. So that's included. Overtime hours is what kills departments. If you don't have the right personnel or enough personnel, then you're paying a lot of overtime. And as well as that's going to get on the technician itself, because the last thing I want is to have a technician leave because I'm asking them to work more hours. So overall, just do what you need and plan the equipment that you need and plan around it. Because at the end of the day, you're only as good as the equipment you have and the technicians that's working that equipment. And that helps with budget. But I can go on for hours with budget, though, so I'm trying to keep it short.
We may have some more. Yeah, we may have some more budget questions come up here from the audience, so we'll see. With that, I guess I'll turn it back over to Adam here, who's going to help us moderate these questions. But anyone who's tuning in, if there's a question that we haven't gotten to yet, go ahead and throw that in that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And with that, Adam, do your magic.
Oh, my magic. Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And thank you guys for giving so many questions. I think we've got like 20 plus questions in here that we need to answer. So we got a lot of good comments and a lot of good questions. So thank you guys for engaging so much. This one's for Frank. What's the temperature that you use for the water for your soaking?
It goes back to what your enzymatic cleaner recommends. There's some 20 to 35. I've seen some a little higher, some a little lower. So just goes back to what does IFU on that container say to use?
Absolutely. And yeah, if it's an enzymatic, it's got a temperature on the bottle, make sure that you have a temp probe in your sink and you know what that temperature is. That's a really important part. The ATP testing, do you use ATP testing for endoscopes? And if so, what is the frequency of the ATP testing?
Right now, we use it as a check system as to, hey, I try to get all technicians the same amount within a week. With this competition, everybody wants me. All right, let's go with ATP testing because I'm going to win this prize at the end of the month. You say it's so great, so let's do it now. And of course, it's done after manual cleaning before the AER.
Gotcha. Okay. This is a good one. Just came in. Are your technicians tiered? Do they have room for growth? And how do you incentivize someone to stay and excel in your department?
Great question, because the last thing I want to do is lose a good employee because there's no growth. So I start off as a technician 1. They're not certified. They're very green to it, and they're learning a good foundation. Within 2 years, they have to be certified. So that mark usually is the HLD equipment or HLD technician 2. Then I have a senior technician. Then I have a supervisor, a coordinator, then a manager. Full potential growth there. I want to keep good employees for as long as they want to stay with me.
Absolutely. And I actually, having been and visited VCU, I can say that you are doing a great job with that. Your staff is amazing there. Let's see.
Thank you.
Hey, Adam, can I ask?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Let me ask a follow-up question on that. Keeping people is so critical, obviously, in the conversation of training people, because you're investing a lot of time, a lot of effort in these folks through that onboarding process and through everything else that you pour into them. And that a lot of that has to do with culture, which we didn't talk too much about on this session, but can you give us a snapshot of how you would describe your department culture? Like you said, you've got a great team, and that's honestly, but maybe disappointingly, we don't hear that as much as we probably should from department leaders. Usually it's kind of the complaints and the headaches about your staff. But, it's obvious that you're really excited about the folks that you've got on your team and the passion and the purpose they have. But how did you cultivate that, or what does it look like when you walk into VCU HLD?
Well, I'll touch on a little bit before about the customers, but it's buy-in. Why are we here? They know at the end of the day, I'm going to do whatever I can to keep a patient safe. And they've pretty much accepted that buy-in as well. I see them working hard, and I reward performance. A lot of people say, you've been here X amount of years, I'm going to go ahead and reward you. I try to reward performance to keep everyone on the same path. And at the end of the day, we get along. We joke around, we do here and there, but we know when it's time to process, hey, we're in here, we're doing our job. So just to keep everyone there, as Adam touched on, you got to have that ladder for improvement because we want to keep great employees staying there.
Absolutely. Here's a question. With so much equipment that you guys have, how do they work together? Are they all connected?
Yes, well, I currently have 15 AERs. They're all networked. And that scanning system I brought up earlier, that makes everything connected. So if the leak tester is different than the sink, different than the AER, different than the cabinets. It's that scan in between them is where I can go back and get all my data from. My coordinator's there. She reflects over it. We talk. I work close with my team. If there's an issue, if we see a trend, then we re-educate. Make life easier for everybody.
Right. And it's connected all the way through the process, right? I mean, the leak testing is tracked. When it goes in the AER, it's tracked. When it goes into the drying cabinet, it's tracked, and coming out as well, right? Absolutely.
They're all scan points. So as you've heard, anything from this it's data, tracking your data. I know exactly if it took 5 minutes on the leak tester, if it's a trend, life happens, maybe something interfered with that. But if I notice more than 3 or 4 minutes, then we see, why is it taking so long? It's not speed, but you still have that restraints that you have to get in order to proceed, make sure that 2-hour window.
Yep, absolutely. Let's see. What program do you use for, I suppose this is a tracking question, what program are you using for tracking?
We currently use SensorTrack, and it's the scope module.
Okay, very good. Let's see. Which IHLD is recommended in reprocessing endoscopes, OPA or peracetic acid or something else?
Well, in our AERs, it's peracetic acid, and we go with an OPA with in our manual gust stations. But I mean, that refers to IFUs. Not every person has tested this in OPA, so you have to get maybe a special high-level disinfection, which goes back to before the equipment or merchandise is purchased, you need to evaluate the IFUs to see exactly what are they saying you need to clean with.
Exactly right. This one is kind of a clarification question from your tiered system for your technicians. Is a tech lead the same as a tech 2?
No, a tech 2 is a certified individual that is very confident and knows how to do everything with little supervision. A lead tech is going to be a tech 3, and I rely on them they can be there for mentoring, or they can be there to help educate or verify anything that needs to be in the room.
Absolutely. This one's more of an overview question, but can you explain what's in each of the 3 rooms? So you talked about your 3-room system. What is in each area or each room?
All right, so the first room is decon. So it's going to be, that's where you do your leak tests, your sink work, your flushing and brushing. Then you take from there and you go to your AER. AER is in our second room. Only processing is done in our second room. And that's manual processing. That's, like I said, an AER itself. Then the clean room is the third room, and that's where the scopes are taken to dry or for pickup for the department.
Gotcha. Let's see here. All right, let's try this one. Do you do quality testing on the cleanliness besides boroscoping, such as ATP testing? And I guess you did answer that one a little bit earlier, huh, on the ATP?
Yes.
Yeah. I got to follow up. And this goes back to the onboarding piece, but continuing education, right? Like you talked about your tiered system and about onboarding, et cetera. But as a department, how do you view your role in continually educating your technicians? What does that look like at the department level, at the expectation level for your technicians? Kind of walk us through that vision.
Well, I'm expecting them to be certified within 2 years. So it goes back to, we go through CBSPD, which they have to get 100 credits within 5 years. I try to help them out. All my vendors, they come in and do an in-service once a year. And then I do my competency check every year. In 2019, I had a group of individuals. We were working on a poster we were going to submit for SG&A. And I was going to take the 4 people that were with me, we were all going to go to SG&A because that's how I can rationalize it to the hospital. This is continuing education. We're working on this poster as a team. We're going to go and submit it as a team. Between that, we do webinars once a month. They have within a 2-week period to look at a webinar that I specify. They have to show me the printout after it's done, and we'll sit down and we'll talk about if there's any questions. Technology is forever changing, so you have to keep going with it or you're going to lose it with continuing education.
Is this webinar going to be assigned next month?
You know what? It probably is. But yeah, we do webinars like PPE. We've done, I think that was a webinar of July to let people know the importance of PPE. June, I think, was lit magnification. So yeah, I can have Beyond Clean in August.
That's right. Well, before we close here, if folks have questions specifically for you, because we did not get to all the questions here, but if they've got some more questions for you, want to get in contact, just down the road and like bounce some ideas and stuff off of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
You can email is probably the best, and then if we going back and forth, we can't do that, then we'll work out. Maybe I call them every once in a while. Yes, please shoot me an email. I don't know. I'm sure you guys have my email address if you throw it up for them. And just give me a little time because I typically answer my emails later in the evening. That's when I have time to sit down. Hey, I'll get to you guaranteed.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Frank and Hank. I feel like you guys need a buddy comedy, Frank and Hank.
I'll second
Yes.
They provided some great takeaways for HLD education and department workflows. If you guys do have additional questions that you want to ask Frank or Hank, their contact information is found in the speaker bio tool in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. There's going to be a short 15-minute break for the next session, and just as a reminder, you can access the CE survey and certificate by visiting beyondclean.net/virtual events, and you will be automatically transferred to that survey page after the conference. All of today's sessions will be available on demand to share and view after the live event has concluded. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next session.
See you.